just come onto the scene, roughly about 2-3 years ago, naturally a lot of questions are coming to the fore. And this is a very, very new space. So my job here is not to give you any definitives at all, because the questions are still being discussed and debated back and forth. Rather, think of this as a prompt, pun intended. We actually have at the School of Divinity a whole new course that we're introducing. So we actually have an MSc program in Science and Religion, both online and in person, and that will be starting next year as well. So you can see it's picking up speed very, very fast. So my plan for today is to just set the stage for you. Like, what is AI? What is this thing that people are talking about left, right, and center? How is it impacting our lives? And then I'll move on to the subtitles of our discussion today. What are the opportunities that AI presents for Islam and Muslims? And then what are the threats? And as I said, a lot of these are tentative. These are still up in the air. I'll then get on to a burning question, a question that really is on the minds of many people. And what that is, I'll leave it as a surprise for now. You can have a guess at that. Right, so what is AI? In very simple terms, this is a very sophisticated calculator. I've seen it presented that way. It has very high computational mechanisms that allows it to do sometimes very complicated tasks very efficiently, far more efficiently than human beings. So just a hands up, have any of you used a calculator before? Assuming everyone here has, right? So if you go back 50 years ago, there were no such things as calculators, at least not the ones that you could have in your hand. Have you ever seen the log button in the calculator before, or the multiply button? So if you ever wanted to do complicated logs or complicated mathematical multiplications, you would have these things called log tables. There would be this big book, and you'd have to go number by number. And back in the day, that was a skill set. That was like you were the bee's knees if you knew how to navigate a log book. But now that's condensed into a calculator. Similar today, AI is reducing a lot of the things that we take for granted in very, very interesting ways. So if you ever wanted to find out information prior to Google, you'd go to the library, right? Where you ask your professor. When Google came, it democratized knowledge to a large degree. You could just type in a few keywords to be able to get information very fast. AI is not doing one step up. It actually allows it to do the search for you. So right now, have any of you heard of ChatGPT? I'm assuming most people have. Yeah, so students, not surprised, they know ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, very recently they released something called agent mode. And agent mode is you ask it to do something, let's say, book me a holiday across these particular months at these particular sites. It does it in 3 minutes for you, rather than you physically going out, searching everything, finding the best deals and all of that. So what's happening is we're getting very, very increasing amounts of efficiency through computational digital mechanisms. And you already have them. They're quite embedded in your existing practice day to day. So your mobile phones, they have AI in them. If any of you have, what is the name of the digital device? Alexa. If any of you have Alexa at home, that's AI, right? If you've ever used Microsoft Word, have any of you seen those things? Sometimes it goes red underline or blue underline because of their grammar or spelling. That's AI in effect. Less sophisticated, but AI nonetheless. Now, so the question is now, where is this going, right? How sophisticated can AI be? Are we going to move towards some kind of matrix reality? So some of the younger kids may not know what the matrix is. Watch the movies from the early 2000s, you'll know what I mean. But so this is prompting a lot of concerns and interesting questions. Just to add some further clarity, there are 3 levels to artificial intelligence. There is something called ANI, which means artificial narrow intelligence. This is when artificial intelligence just produces very specific tasks, right? So if you've designed an AI just to search books, that's what its function is. If you've designed AI just to, do your scheduling for the day, that's what AI is. So these are very narrow. They're very, very narrow, right? The step above, so this is probably where ChatGPT might fit in terms. The step above is called artificial general intelligence. So this is the kind of intelligence that humans do. So humans can work spontaneously, they can react and adapt to new situations, right? Currently, AI doesn't have that inherent spontaneity or flexibility. But a lot of these big organizations, they're trying to make AI so sophisticated that it can perhaps reach a form of general intelligence. So imagine you have a robot coming into you. It can have an excellent conversation with you. It can even make you think that there might be something inside that tin, like a soul. Something very, very, very human-like. Very, very efficient in convincing you that's an agent of sorts. The third stage, and this is now probably the realm of science fiction, is that can these machines have consciousness, right? Can these really be a mukallaf, as we say in Arabic, right? Can they have taklif? And that's, right now, science fiction. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, God knows what's going to happen, right? But that's what the stages are. For now, where we are probably somewhere here. Just to give you like a rough benchmark, we're probably somewhere here. But whether we can achieve this or this, that's still open for debate, right? Are we happy? Just a thumbs up? All good? So far? Excellent. Very good. So I'm Punjabi. I have a Pakistani background, so if I speak too fast, let me know to slow down. I will. Right, okay. So why are people talking about this now? AI has been around since the 1950s, 1960s-ish, right? So what's caused this immediate fascination and interest? Because AI is a very, very disruptive technology. It is changing the way we think, it is changing the way we act at a very drastic speed. So, someone at university, we have a huge question now about what kind of skill sets are we teaching our students. Because even basic skills, like for example, being able to just do a literature review, going out hunting sources, that's just now done at the click of a button. So, and even it can summarize. So I don't know if any of you have played with the ChatGPT, the new one that came out, 5. It can summarize entire PDFs, book sizes, monographs. It can do essays up to 5,000 words. It can even write books for children now automatically. It can even spur out videos. Just to give you an idea, there are a lot of Hollywood producers that were investing in new Hollywood studios. They've shut down those projects. We're talking about some of $800 to $900 million projects. They've shut those down because now you can just prompt your way to certain videos that are very Hollywood-like. So the scale is unprecedented. Very, very, very fast. Usually what happens with new technologies, they change or they have their impact across a generation. So if you go back, for example, 200 years ago, we would still be in an agricultural society, right? Urbanization and industrialization was just starting. But that change took place across the generation, from the father-mother side to the children's side. What's happening with AI is that it's changing immediately within a generation, right? And that is now forcing us to look at this very carefully. That's why there are a lot of concerns, there are a lot of questions, and there are a lot of discussions about AI. And it's not just hitting the academic sphere or the economic market. Like Google, for example, fired 6,000 employees when ChatGPT first came out, right? It's not just hitting those, it's hitting every single sector that you and I know. Politics, as we'll come to see, the religious sphere, which is the focus of today's talk, the academic sphere, the economic sphere, all of these are being disrupted by AI. So, here are some examples to help you appreciate what's happening. Alicia Furmis is on record the first lady who has married an AI hologram, right? This happened about a few years ago. I think somewhere in Europe. And you can find this funny if you want, but she said, this is the best listening partner that I've ever had. I wonder why, so, right? So we have now a clear link between AI and how it's even affecting, in the minds of some, things like intimacy, things like relationships, things like love. And this is not just an isolated example. In Japan, there's a whole subculture where this is happening at interesting rates, right? So people are developing relationships with avatars, for instance, right? People are having fascinating conversations with a lot of AI that they've created, and they have a lot of meaningful connections with them. What will that do? What will that entail, right? Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of skepticism about some of these things. That's fair enough. I'm not saying at the moment what is right or wrong. That's not the purpose of these. The purpose of these is to show you how society is slowly getting transformed in the wake of AI. Here's another one. So Gen Z, the new generation, the existing young generation, they are going to be hit the hardest with AI. The reason is because the very job lines that you and I know of today, they're going to be, right? So things like, for example, even telecoms, they're being hit the hardest. So you know when you call people up, right, a company, you usually expect a person to be there. Frustratingly, it's becoming more automated. That job is really being taken over by AI. 60% of that sector is already being taken over by AI. You also have things like, academic work. A lot of university professors are quite, sweating because what does this mean for education? There's a school in London, in the UK, which is completely based on AI now. No physical teachers. There's one headmaster and just high school is run by AI, right? So how does that work? Have any of you heard of Khan Academy? Just a yes or no, Khan Academy? So for those of you who haven't heard of Khan Academy, it's probably one of the biggest education bodies in the world. So Khan, he was just your typical uncle. His nephews would come over and he started teaching them. And then, he started doing these videos. And they were just so well articulated that they blew up on YouTube. And that eventually transformed into this amazing educational guru. In Khan Academy, prior to AI, what used to happen was you would have like a generic, Q&A for every single question. So if you had, questions about a certain topic, evolution, biology, physics, whatever have you, you can just go into these Q&As. What's now happening in Khan Academy is that AI has been integrated into their system such that every kid now has a customized question and answer set. So it's no longer a generic application, it is customized and tailored to your specific needs and demands as a user. So you can see now, we're kind of now really shifting the academic game. One question is, do we really need teachers if we can now interact with AI that can already address everything according to your level? So if you've ever had a chat with AI before, have any of you spoken to AI by any chance? Just a yes or no? A few of you. For those of you who have not, I strongly recommend try it today. It's not haram, trust me. Right? Just try it today. What happens is, not only does it know, because remember, AI is hooked to every single knowledgeable item out there, right? So everything that's in a digital format, it has access to. And what's super surprising here is that you ask it about quantum mechanics, you ask it about relativity, not only can it give you very technical answers at the level of an academic, you can ask it, simplify for my grandmother who doesn't know anything about physics, and it will reduce it down at that level. My own mom, for instance, she's about 65, Allah have mercy on her, so she doesn't speak, Arabic or anything, she just knows Punjabi, Urdu, English, that's what she knows. And so, what ChatGPT is really good for is that it's now able to translate from one language to another with almost 99% efficiency, both in speech as well as in text. So now the question is, well, what happens to translations? What happens to languages? In the University of Chicago is one of the biggest universities in the US right now. They are considering closing down their entire classics program. By classics, I mean humanities, linguistics, including things like Arabic, Hindi, Chinese, Buddhism, etc. So it's really disrupting the academic sphere, and it's forcing universities to rethink what does it mean to educate today for a job tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Right. As I said, I was in Dubai prior to coming here. UAE became the first country in the world to use AI for generating civil law. Right. So as I mentioned earlier, this is affecting everything, not just a private sphere, but also in the macro sphere as well. And I'm sure that this is going to be picked up by several other nation states as well. So, now, here's where we get into about Islam. So what is the relationship of Islam with science and technology? Well, if you pick up any book on the history of Islam, provided it's not Islamophobic inherently, you will notice that at least if you go to the primary text, Islam has had a very interesting relationship. Just like with every religion, it's had a lot of conversations about things like astronomy back in the day. Right now, our knowledge levels tell us that the Earth is not the center of the universe. The Sun is, and we are going around it, right? 1,000 years ago, that wasn't the assumption of the day. And so there are a lot of interesting theological questions, Is Earth really the center? Yeah or nay? Theologians debated about this. You'll find this in the Arabic text. The same thing that goes with medicine, right? So with medicine, I'll give you an interesting example. How many medics do we have here? We have a few medics. Oh, mashallah, excellent, very, very good, right? So when you went into your first, surgery, did you guys shiver? Did you guys crack under pressure? Some of you are like, no, good for you. So not for some of us, right? So some medical students, they literally, I think, pass out or they faint when they see the sight of blood, perhaps indicating they're in the wrong profession. But right now we are absolutely fine with people opening us up and splitting bodies up and looking at organs. That's absolutely normal today. But if you go in certain parts of history, it was considered taboo, right? It would be very, very weird if you opened up a body because they were considered a sacred thing, right? So our very presumptions about how we treat things like medicine, how we treat our body's dignity and respect have evolved over time. Even the printing press, right? There's a huge debate that you can find in the history of Islam regarding the printing press, right? So one of the biggest questions was, can we print the Quran? Because previously it was done by calligraphers, like typists, right? And the reason why there was a debate around this is because some people said, well, if you're hammering the Quran, this is disrespectful to the Quran, because that's what printing presses do. You constantly do this, right? And so because of that, some people said, we shouldn't do this. Some people said, we should do this. If you go in more recent times, the microphone, for example, the microphone, believe it or not, some people considered that it had the jinn in it. They thought this was, because electricity is a brand new thing. We take today for granted when we hit the remote, something turns on from a distance. Like that's very normal for us today. Go back 200 years ago, that would be considered this is the work of the jinn. I'm not going near you, you're doing black magic, right? There's a very famous anecdote of King Faisal from Saudi Arabia. And so there were some scholars around him who had this impression that the microphone was filled with jinn, right? So he told a qari, recite the Quran in this, and then throughout Mecca, you would hear the Quran. And that's when it convinced him, no, this is actually quite powerful. That's actually powerful. So there's been appropriation, there's been debates, there's been discussion. Why have I gone through this? Is to show you that AI is just another item on this list. That we are now in a new phase where a new tech is forcing us to rethink, reconsider, discuss. Okay, so you can talk about many opportunities and you can talk about many different threats. But for the sake of simplicity, I've just chosen 2 examples for each one. Please feel free to ask me in the Q&A, and I'll be happy to address those questions. So, what are the opportunities that we have? Right now, what's happening is that ChatGPT or equivalents of ChatGPT are being used to significantly increase our access to primary texts. So most of the Quran, most of the tradition is in Arabic, right? Or if you wanted to study in India, Pakistan, it will be Urdu, classical Urdu in particular. It's Turkish if you're going to Turkey. But these are, and Farsi as well. So these are the main primary Islamic languages, if you want to put it that way, right? Now, for the most part, most Muslims do not know all of these languages. Even Arabic, classical Arabic is very hard, right? So then how do you get over that obstacle? AI, believe it or not, is being used for removing that obstacle. Right now, as I said, not just modern Arabic, ChatGPT has the ability to translate any classical text with 99% efficiency. That means what now? And that doesn't mean just from Arabic to English, Arabic to Urdu, Bangla, Hindi, whatever language that you want, right? Whatever language that you want. So that means there's going to be further democratization of knowledge. That means that more and more people are able to access text should they want to and not be obstacled by translation. So one of my friends, as well as my sheikhs, one of my teachers, his name is Mufti Ibrahim. He's the co-founder of Al-Balagh Academy, which is a big online seminary in the UK. And his specialization is Arabic. Like that's what he focuses on, right? That's his bread and butter, Arabic. So he called me up one day. He's like, Shoaib, have you played with ChatGPT? I'm like, yeah, I have. It's like, and it's like, have you? I was like, yeah. And he told me himself he said he fed one very hard to translate or hard to process text. He put it in ChatGPT. He said that not only did it translate it really well, it even got some of the idioms and nuances perfectly. And then what he said next made me laugh. He said that Shoaib, translation is dead. This is someone whose job is on translation. Right? For 20 years he's been focused on this. So, I mean, I was quite surprised by that. Now, you may think that this may remove certain skills, but I think what's happening is, just like with the Industrial Revolution, some skills will be no longer useful, and new skills are going to come to the fore. What you're seeing here is an example of how the landscape is changing. Now, another thing. So, if you pick up any Arabic today, you know, most houses that you have here, you will see that they're very cleanly printed, right? They're written in very beautiful fonts and etc. If you pick up any book on fiqh, hadith, usul, whatever have you, you will notice that they also look very pretty. But a lot of the primary material is actually something called manuscript form. So if you look at classical manuscripts, they're usually handwritten, right? And they usually don't have full stops. They sometimes don't even have, you know those dots that you see, the diacritical marks? Not even they are there, right? So it's a huge endeavor to translate a classical manuscript into a critical edition that is very beautifully printed like you see today. Now that can easily be accelerated because of AI. There are many teams at the moment today that are working on looking at these old manuscripts, indexing them, codifying them, and converting them into digitalized text such that they become part of our digital atmosphere. So you can clearly see here, there's a huge opportunity here, not just for Muslims at large, but even for academics. This opens up a lot of windows and opportunities for further research. The reason why that's important is because a lot of the manuscripts that we have are tucked away in many libraries in the world. In Turkey, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt. And sometimes those libraries are hard to get, right? Very hard to get. And they're just, no one's studying them, no one's analyzing them, but they probably contain a wealth of information that probably we don't have access to everyone. So that's why this is a very interesting thing. Another thing is, and this is where I think most of the thing is going to be focused on, you will begin to see very shortly, in a few years' time from now, a lot of apps that are going to emerge. So AI is now being used to teach Arabic. AI, believe it or not, is being used to teach qira'at. Have any of you seen the videos on YouTube by any chance? So there are some people who, you know, when they recite the Quran, the Qaris, right? Sometimes they make mistakes, right? And sometimes it can be very expensive or problematic to travel just to get your qira'at fixed. But now, ChatGPT does it for you. So you can recite in the Quran, you can recite the Quran in ChatGPT, and it can give you feedback. Now, whether it's good or not, that's a different question, but that will probably change over time. Another thing that you can probably get with this is, how many of you have gone online to get a fatwa or some kind of religious advice? How many of you have gone online? Quite a few people, I'd say. How many have spoken to people in person for a fatwa or for advice? Quite a few people, right? Now, what's going to happen is, we are going to see the rise of, this is my own coinage, iMuftis, right? Where people are now scanning a lot of these digital texts and putting them up such that you have a mufti, a digital version of a mufti that can answer religious edicts for you on the spot. So first it can ask you, are you Hanafi? Are you Shafi'i? Are you Maliki? Whatever your madhab is. And then it can give you a response according to your specific background. Very interesting. I'll give you a funny anecdote that reflects some of the premature technology about 2 years ago. When ChatGPT came out, late 2022, there was a student from Bangladesh. He did his MSc in something to do with computers, and he decided to do his dissertation on AI. Okay? Now this is when ChatGPT was very young. It still had a lot of mistakes, right? And what it did for, what he did for his dissertation, so he took the main 6 books of Sunni Hadith, the main 6 books, right? Bukhari, Muslim, etc. And he plugged them into a ChatGPT infrastructure. And then what he did was he put it online. This was in February 2023. As soon as he put it online, guess what Muslims around the world started doing? They started asking it for fatwas, right? So on some occasions, it was pretty right, so how many prayers are in a day, 5 times? How do you do the prayer according to one method? it was able to give you the right motions and all of that. But then in some cases, it was slipping up, for example. It was slipping up. So one interesting case is, this is just a question. Are Muslims allowed to eat pork? No, right? That's categorically forbidden in Islam. They're not allowed to eat pork, right? Now, when it was asked, and here's another question. If something dies naturally in the sea, are Muslims allowed to consume it? Your name. If it dies naturally in the sea, i.e. it's not a predator, you can consume it. No problem there. Okay. Now, somebody asked the question, if I find pork in the sea, can I eat it? And it said yes. Right? So it didn't know the wider rules on how to interpret the hadith, because the hadith don't come with the principles. The principles are laid out in books of usul al-hadith, usul al-fiqh, right? So that was one problem there. But the problem became even bigger. So there was a huge debate on Twitter, very, very significant debate. Somebody asked the question, right? Remember, just Sunni books. These are just Sunni books. Somebody asked the question, who is the rightful successor after the Prophet? Who is the right caliphate? Now, according to Sunni Muslims, it's Abu Bakr, then Umar, then Ali, then Uthman. It said Ali. It opened up a whole debate on Twitter, right? So my point is that was for me a window into how AI will eventually explode into these, what I refer to as techno-madhabs, these muftis of sorts. Everyone happy with that? Just say your name. Oh, cool. Excellent. Very good. Cool. All right. Now, let's move on to some of the threats of AI. So, AI is really dependent on data. It eats a lot of data, right? That's why you will probably notice that when we have AI clusters around the world, they're consuming a lot of electricity, they're consuming a lot of water, a lot. So much so that it's now making significant dents even in our GDPs, right? Significant dents. So just to give you a recent example, ChatGPT, the owner of ChatGPT is a company called OpenAI. OpenAI just recently signed a contract in Abu Dhabi to open up a new AI cluster the size of Monaco. That is almost an entire city bigger than Edinburgh, right? Now, why are they doing that? Because you need wide infrastructure. You need heavy infrastructure to make these things faster, better, store more, and on and on and on. So in the next few years, you will begin to see an increasing infrastructure in many parts of the world. Now, how does it link to this? There's an expression in computing called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, right? So what that means is, if your data is poor, your output will be poor as well, right? Now, there's a whole problem at the moment with ChatGPT, or equivalents of ChatGPT, where it is biased according to certain value systems, right? So I'll give you one example. One of the biggest, I would say, concerns regarding the Quran is that you don't do something called tahrif. Tahrif means you change or alter the wordings, right? When ChatGPT 3 first came out, this is one of the earlier models, I asked it, I tried it, ChatGPT, I want you to change this ayah so subtly, but it changed the meaning entirely, and it did, no problem. It was able to do tahrif, no problem for me. I then spoke to a book publisher in the UK, and I told him that this is going to create big problems for us in the future. You need to keep your eye out on this. Because he was linked to various high sector people. And I told him, give me any scriptural basis and I can ask it to change it in front of me. So he said, let's open up Imam Malik, right? I asked him to open it. He said, then choose this hadith and ask it to change it. In front of his eyes, it was able to introduce just a small change such that it completely flips the meaning. And now the bystander won't know what that sudden flip is. But it has significant impacts there. Now what happens, if you ever ask ChatGPT 5, do tahrif on either the Quran or change the hadith, it doesn't do it. It doesn't do it. Why? Because Muslims in the Google ecosystem, there's a Muslim network there, right? You may have your ethical concerns regarding Google for whatever that they're doing, but because of those Muslim voices, that changes were implemented in Gemini, in ChatGPT. So you can see how having technologists who have at least Muslim sensitivities is very important in these spaces, I would say. Right? But there's a clear problem here with biases. So if you ask, for example, big questions about who are some of the most dangerous people? Sometimes they'll say Muslims, for example. Who are some of the most provocative people? They'll say Muslims. Why? Because it's been fed certain kinds of data. So those are certain threats. Those are certain threats. My point is that in terms of weaponizing things for undermining religion, and this is not just Islam, by the way, it's for every religion. This is going to, I think, change the game quite drastically. The other problem that I see, and this is something that I'm working on personally, is how AI could potentially undermine religious authority, right? Now what that means is the following. Right now, at least in my generation, when Sheikh Google came out 10, 15 years ago, Google was like the bee's knees, right? You can find anything there. If you wanted to find if something's haram, halal, you just search it up, khalas, it's there for you. I don't need to speak to Sheikh, so to speak. And there was even a term that came out. Have any of you heard of fatwa shopping before? Any of you heard of fatwa shopping? So you keep searching for fatwas until you find the one that you want, right? That's fatwa shopping. And so what happens is you now have a wealth of options online such that you can choose the one that suits your interests. What will happen, I think, if we do get these muftis, these digital muftis of sorts, what it can potentially do is it can undermine trust in human authority. So let me give an example. If you want to become a sheikh or an imam, right, you have to go through certain training. So you learn years of Arabic, you learn years of usul, fiqh, kalam, whatever have you. And these programs can be anywhere from 7 to 20 years, depending on how intense you want to go, right? Al-Azhar, for example, takes about 4 or 5 years. Same thing, University. There are many religious centers around the world. Even in the UK, we have a place called Darul Ulum. Darul Ulums are just basically spread all over. And you can take around 7 years to get your shahada, khalas, you become a sheikh, become a Muslim, right? Now, here's the problem. I can foresee, and I've already seen, where some people might say, why should I trust you? You have limited knowledge, you have limited time. This thing here, this AI, has more time than you, it's faster than you, and it has more memory than you. You probably don't know all the hadith aslan. You probably don't know all the books aslan. Why should I trust you now? Why should I trust you? So that kind of questionability, I think, is going to emerge pretty soon. That's my prediction. This is my prediction, as both as an academic, as a Muslim, that's my prediction, that's what happened, right? Just to be clear, I don't need to be scary one, I'm just stating what I feel is the state of affairs, right? The other thing that I have an inkling about is that, so we have, at least in Sunni Islam, we have 4 main schools of thought in jurisprudence: Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki, Shafi'i. These are the main 4. So what happens if, once you feed it all these classical books, what if it draws out an opinion that shows how each one of them is wrong and gives you a new opinion that none of our scholars in the past entertained before? How would we use that? Would we consider it as a valid opinion? Yes or no, for example. So these are some of the questions that are emerging. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, and I'm about to close, and you can ask your questions. I mentioned at the beginning that there was a burning question that is on everyone's minds. In the academic community, one of the most pressing and most interesting questions is, can AI ever become an agent? Can it ever become a mukallaf of sorts? That is really the key thing, right? And this may not be of interest to anyone. It just may be a philosophical question. But here are just some suggestions that people are thinking about. So when we speak to one another, we usually assume that the person in front of me is a real person, is a real agent. And we usually use various registers, like they can talk to me, I can have a chat with them, they have psychological states, they have expressions, right? Right now, none of us treat ChatGPT as if that's a real agent. So that's not a real mukallaf in front of me. Now, so when we want to assess, these are just some of the metrics that we use. We usually say things that have intelligence, we usually consider them as a mukallaf, as an agent of sorts. By agent, I simply mean an entity that you can hold accountable, an entity that you can hold responsible, right? We usually consider social interactions. For example, have any of you had a fascinating conversation with a rock? No, right? So you're not going to hold a rock accountable, but you will hold a child of a certain age accountable, an adult, a friend, a parent, right? Psychological states, right? So one of the ways of assessing if we have a functional agent in front of us is if they display emotions, fear, anger, happiness. Those are important aspects of how we believe the entity in front of us is real. Can they process moral and ethical questions, right? Does it have beliefs that something is right or wrong? Or is it simply processing things, right? And the most important question is the ruh. So Muslims believe that Adam a.s. was endowed with a spirit. And so every Muslim, or every human being thereafter is endowed with a spirit as well, right? Can AI have those qualities? Yes or no? Can we live in a time where the matrix could be a genuinely real thing? Right? So these are some of the questions that you will find in the academic sphere. I don't want to go on to these for too much, but I just want to say thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that was an edifying talk. If you have any questions, do let me know. Thank you. Go for it, yeah.
Tell us everything you know about the company that owns ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Because I hear it's an Israeli company and it's starting to interfere with its advertising.
Yeah, so so it's not just ChatGPT. Even there's infrastructure of Google that's in Israel as well, right? Now that question is very entangled with a lot of things. So OpenAI, for example, is also right now being used in universities or equivalents of their own. Now, when we train that, because when you engage with ChatGPT, that still acts as training data for it. So are we somehow contributing to those assets? That is the question. That is something that I'm still fully finding out myself, because what sometimes happens is they section things off, right? So this is our commercial product, this is our economic product, this is our military product, for example. But is there some kind of way where all of these are arced together? I don't know enough to be able to make it clear. But it would not surprise me. It genuinely would not surprise me if that technology was used there. It's already being used there. We know from Google at least it's being used. But I'm not sure about ChatGPT at the moment. I'm not so sure.
So do you think they have the ability to kind of go down our ChatGPT?
I think so. I genuinely would not be surprised. Believe it or not, ChatGPT can be used in court of law.
Okay.
Anything you put in ChatGPT can be used in court of law. So just be wary of that. Yeah? So that's why if you don't want it to be in its training feed, there's a little option on the top right where you click on it such that it says do not train this, do not use this information to train. So you have the option as a buyout if you want it. Not that it's charged, but it's just an option there if you want to.
But it's usually of poor quality, that AI, because it's of no interest to them then. It's that data. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, my question is, you're saying some universities are closing down, let's say, the classical studies.
I didn't say so many. I'm just saying Chicago is closing a specific department down. It may be, yeah. I just want to make sure if this goes on YouTube, I don't want my name to be there. So, okay? So.
But do you think there is a real risk of learning classical Arabic, learning Farsi, classical Urdu? It is challenging, it's difficult.
Yep.
It's quite easy to use ChatGPT to analyze this text for you. The question is kind of like multifaceted. First, do you think, because we can become over-reliant on it, many people won't take the effort anymore to do these difficult studies, because we're all reliant on interpretation from a private-owned service, which might be exposed to like private lobby groups, perhaps from Israel or other countries that might want to, push their own agenda. Do you think that's like a real risk? And are there like lobby groups?
Yeah. So I think you've asked two questions in there. So one is the question of reliance on skills that we really take of value today. One of them, for example, is learning languages. So I personally wish ChatGPT came out 10 years ago, then I wouldn't have to learn classical Arabic. I'm like, why now? Why not 10 years ago, right? But jokes aside, I personally do feel just like none of us here know how to do agriculture, I think, for the most part, right? None of us here know how to use log tables. None of us know how to, till the farms. Those were all considered high-value skills 150 years ago. But we don't complain about that, right? If you wanted to even take it further in the case of knowledge, if you wanted to seek knowledge 1,000 years ago, you would travel 3-4 months, And you would also have to learn how to write calligraphy. And you'd have to write it so well such that you wouldn't make manuscript errors. But we don't take pride in any of those things. Those things are now digitized for us. I think this phase that we're getting into is just another point in that development. So I don't really think that that's a concern for me, given what I've seen in history. That's with regards to valuing skill sets. As opposed to now, your question about how maybe biases can trickle in, or authoritative interpretations can trickle in based on who's controlling the AI, that's a given that's going to happen. So I have mentioned it to high stakes people who know certain people in politics, that I told them, at least that was my advice to them, that if we don't invest, and I'm not talking about just Muslim, anyone, if you want to have the most genuine representation of your faith, you need to invest in AI now. That's what I told them, right? So whatever you think is the correct value, you have to do it, because if you don't do it, people who are against you will do it for you, and they'll probably do it to tarnish you. And that's happening. That is already slowly happening. Do you guys, so one of the most funny things that I've seen online, there's what's that name? There's a very famous Australian or New Zealand lady, Lily. So she asked this one answer questions. Have you seen that on YouTube by any chance? Yeah? So she's like, how many times should you pray? All of that, right? And she became famous. She blew up on YouTube by asking, does Islam promote violence or peace? And then he gave one-word answers, peace. And she became famous. This is a non-Muslim, by the way. I think she's converted now because of this journey that she's had. You are now seeing the instrumentalization of AI, where AI is already being used as an authority, even its very simple terms right now, at social media. Right? So people are using AI as if it's a credible authority of sorts. They may still think it's limited, it's still a calculator, fancy calculator. But I think over time, particularly the younger generation, they are going to see a world that me and you have never seen, where everything is now referenced to an AI. That's a totally different game. That's a totally different game.
Maybe just follow up on that. You talk about investing. How do we sort of invest in AI so that we are independent of these huge...
Yeah. Here are a couple of different pieces of advice from myself. Number one, this is my advice to everyone, is that get young children particular into coding. They don't have to be experts in coding, but just get them enough to be able to understand how algorithmic technology works. That's one very important thing. Because a lot of the jobs that are going to open up in 10, 20 years from now will be AI-based, number one. Number two, now if you're asking from a faith-based perspective what we need to do, I would say we definitely need to have people specializing in different spheres here. So we definitely need people that are imams and sheikhs that are well equipped with the tradition, that are able to engage some of these. Because what sometimes happens is that you get a lot of insulation. So if you train in a seminary, ask a seminarian that's just fresh from a seminary, how do you talk about quantum mechanics, how do you talk about AI? They won't have any clue. They will know a lot about the tradition, just to be clear. They will know several things about the tradition, but they just won't know these new things that are coming out. Vice versa is true. So if you speak to someone from the university or the academy, right? How can Islam respond to this? I don't know. I don't know classical Arabic. I don't know what hadiths are. I don't know what, they will have very basic. So what we need is, we need people specializing in their arenas, but opening up these interdisciplinary formats such that knowledge exchange can occur. What is a real danger is at the moment, things are still in insulated forms. So knowledge porosity, I'd say events like these, having courses on AI, having courses on these kinds of things is very important. The third thing is politics. So this is going to be politicized, it already is being politicized. So investing in people that have Muslim sensitivities, that are sharp and witty in the political sphere. Because being a politician is not the same thing as being a scholar. These are two different skill sets, right? So to be able to articulate what are policies that are friendly to religious circles is very key. So having a Muslim voice there is important. As I said, there were people in Google, because there was a network of Muslims in Google who were able to say that you cannot allow tahrif in ChatGPT and these things. We don't have that anymore. If we didn't have that, imagine what could open up, right? So the political sphere. And then the fourth sphere is the technology. Not everyone needs to be Shaykh al-Islam, not everyone needs to be the Grand Mufti. There are some people that need to be the technologists of the future as well. So getting people into AI industries. Getting people into the fintech industry is very important. So I'd say that at least as non-specialists, this is what we can prepare as a Muslim society to be able to at least have long-term impact. That's the kind of long-term vision that I think is strategic, in my opinion. Yes?
Thank you for a brilliant lecture.
Thank you.
Yeah, my understanding is, as you said, that the AI data banks are very energy consuming.
Yeah.
My understanding is that they're also very thirsty. They kind of need a lot of water. So how do you set the developments that we're, I was going to say, looking forward to or not, against the present lack of water in the world,
Yep.
and the pain and the ethical problems that brings to
Yeah.
communities?
So in the academic circle, the one who's caused the biggest fuss around this issue is a lady called Noreen Hertzfeld. She's probably one of the leading voices in AI and theology at the moment. She's highlighted this concern that we have been sold this vision that AI is going to solve all our problems. We need to put all our investment into this. But at the moment, it's soaking up so much water, so much electricity. So if you go to, Elon Musk, he's preparing his own data center. I think it's in Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. There are a lot of complaints about the size of that project and how much water it's consuming, precisely because of how fantastical it is. So as a former engineer, I would say when we think about food, water, energy, these are always going to be recurring engineering problems, right? It always was an issue, it will still be an issue. It's just being hampered right now because we now have more demands than we have supply. Now, when you have a situation like this, you do what you see in COVID. You accelerate scientific progress such that energy demands, energy supplies can increase, and more so through renewable tech. So my previous line of work was actually in renewable technology. I was working on something called fuel cells, where you can take oxygen and hydrogen and convert to clean water, and that process produces electricity. We're now seeing incredible new work where even things like there's a certain kind of paint, it's a solvent, which if you paint on your buildings, it can soak in sunlight and generate electricity for you. That's pretty cool. You also have things like new solar panels that have upped their efficiency. So right now what happens is, with solar panels, is that it can only entertain sunlight at certain angles. So what they've done is that they've changed the material of solar panels such that it has many different kinds of materials that can soak in sunlight from multiple angles. So those are just small-term points that I think will help with the energy crisis and the water crisis. I personally don't buy that this is a huge problem. I think it always was a problem. I think it's just become more in the spotlight because of AI. That's my concern, my perspective at least.
If I will add another question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think energy is a problem, and you sort of highlighted the multiple ways that we are learning to create energy.
Specifically water, you mean?
Actually address the water.
Yeah.
As an engineer.
Yeah. So on the water front, I know less about the water consumption problem, what we're doing to rectify that. From what I last remember reading about water production is, there's a problem with going fully into desalination plants. Because if you bump those up, then you begin to impact the ecosystem in sea life. So I don't know, other than that, what is being used to address that. I have seen where urine and excrements of human beings is being reused in very efficient ways that might make this into a closed circle. I don't know. What was the last thing I read? Just a few days ago, there's a research group in China or in Korea, one of the two, and it said that apparently it can convert human excrement into meat, consumable meat. Now, so if we are able to, be full circle on that front, that could then save us a lot of water, I'd suspect. But those are just speculations at the moment. I don't have enough to be able to give you a concrete answer there.
That sounds like a theological question.
Which one?
The one about converting it.
Yeah. Well, you can add that on the list as well. You can add that on the list.
I'm very concerned. You referenced the Industrial Revolution.
Yep.
And we're still in the Industrial Revolution in that sense. And in the Industrial Revolution, the key question really is the dehumanization throughout the Industrial Revolution.
Yep.
And we're reaching now a point where that's very, very critical. And I think that's the question. So we used to smash machines because the human beings were cut out of the workplace. I worked with glass workers who cut glass, and you can do that all with a machine. Now the glass workers who used to cut it themselves, they look at the glass and say, no, that's a machine job. They can tell. The human is out of it.
Yeah.
So how do we, and that's, for me, this is the biggest question. I'm not a Luddite of smashing machines,
Yeah.
but I am very much against giving our control of our humanity. It's the same with medicine,
Yeah.
you mentioned agriculture.
Yeah.
The consequence of losing our humanity is farm agriculture.
Yeah.
You know, chickens in huge sheds, and losing their limbs, losing the ability to walk.
Sure.
That's happening to chickens, but it won't happen to us unless we can maintain our humanity in the face of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the big question for me.
So the question is, how do we still
How
retain
do we
our humanity?
maintain the human? Now, in a sense, we're in the right place to ask the question because this is an Islamic question.
Yeah.
But to confront this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
without sort of saying, well, let's be Luddites, let's smash the machines.
Yeah.
How do we confront them?
Oh, I think that's a much harder question. We can ask ChatGPT. So I think what I can tell you is, in the science and religion community, there's a new production that came out. It's the world's first handbook on AI and religion. It's being co-edited by two of my colleagues, Bethany Singler and Fraser Watts. And it has multiple perspectives on how to look at humanity, and also looking at how we can retain our authentic selves. Because one of the problems with new technology is there's always an erosion of something of the self. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that depends on the worldview involved. But I'd say that might be a starting point. But I think that's too big of a question to be able to address in 2 minutes. Yep, I've got one here and then one there. Yes, go ahead.
What generation do you think AI is going to become the most everyone's going to be using?
Yours. 100% yours. Yeah. I'd say that, brother, yeah.
It's more of comment, and also hope you can also expand on that in terms of utilizing AI or things like models like ChatGPT. When we look for information, because I'm still learning, I'm using it in my field as a medicine example.
Okay.
But whenever I use it, it's very important to learn how to do the right comment to get the right answer.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's really important. I think this would apply also if we are seeking any knowledge in the Islam field, that we need to make sure that we ask for authentic, for example,
Yeah.
and also we ask for reference.
Sure.
And don't take the answer at face value. We need to critique
Oh, yeah.
what we get, because there are lots of things that it's important to understand the context of this. And if you just take things at face value, you will get confusing answers.
Sure, sure.
Also, you give us more
Yeah. So
advice on how to avoid hallucination.
100%, right? So Surah Hujurat, fatabayyanu. You've got to check your facts and statements that come towards your way. There's no doubt about that. But I think my point was more ethnographic and social. You're right. Most people, some people will want to fact check and everything. But if we treat Facebook as an example, how many people actually fact check what's on Facebook? Very few. That's why a lot of misinformation, propaganda can get circulated involved. My only point was that in the future, can we see a world where, or can we see spaces where a lot of young Muslims are just going to rely on AI without fact checking? Yes. I see that happening in the future. Is there going to be abuse of that? Yes, 100%. That's why I think educating about coding, giving in the perspective of how do you fact check, what source is it, those things become part of that training program, right? I think that particularly for the new generation, the idea of fact checking should be instilled in their upbringing, but whether that actually happens or translates into practice, I'm skeptical about that. I'm not saying that Muslims are bad, just to be clear. I'm just saying that as a social phenomena, it's hard to control and regulate those things, right? For example, alcohol is haram, but do Muslims drink alcohol? Yes, there are some Muslims that drink alcohol, right? I'm just saying a social problem. Yes, go ahead.
How does this relate to Islamic mythology?
Oh, sorry, I confused you for you. So it's okay. So,
Like the end times and Islamic studies.
yeah.
You hear about the different hadiths leading up to the Dajjal.
Yeah.
How does that sort of relate with ours? So like, can you see a progress coming from AI in a sense towards these hadiths?
Wow, first time I've seen progress towards the Dajjal from AI used in a sentence. Right, okay. So I've had a lot of backdoor conversations with Mashayikh on this issue. So at the moment, so you will see some interpretations. For example, the age of Dajjal is the age of deception, the Antichrist, right? It is the age of deception. Some people already overplay that with AI. So AI is able to deceive very quickly, very fast, very efficiently. So some people think that this is the signs of the arrival of the Dajjal, right? Now, there are a lot of speculations that I've seen that I don't think have any veracity. So you know there's a hadith where the Dajjal would come, he'd split open a person and put him back together again. And it's like, now do you believe? It's like, no, because that just confirmed you're Dajjal. So I've seen speculations. These have no veracity, they're just speculations. That what if this was all VR, for instance? Because VR is becoming more and more of an accessible, scalable, commercial enterprise. Have any of you seen the movie? Movies are okay, they're not haram. So Ready Player One, have you guys seen the movie Ready Player One? Yeah? So check that movie out if you haven't. So that's a world, so a lot of these ideas come from fiction because they help you think about your theological perspective, right? In that world, the whole thing is based on VR. So your job is in VR, your livelihood is in VR, your family is in VR, right? And the question is, could this scale up to some kind of VR reality such that it could be the playing field of Dajjal? Because some of the feats that Dajjal does seem so interesting that make a lot of sense in VR, but not so. Now that doesn't mean that miracles are not possible. We definitely believe in that. But I've seen those kinds of speculations at play here. I know that's not a direct question, but there's just so much I've seen on this. People are just whizzing out answers. But the correct answer is Wallahu alam. I do not know.
Even in terms of like physical, so when you mentioned about the water being, obviously it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
The water being withheld from the sky for 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Euphrates river drying up. There will be people fighting over the gold there, all kinds of things. So some of those I think are very clearly non-related to AI. They might be related to AI. I think somebody asked here about water sources being drying up. So it could be related to that, 100%. You could say that, but can we say that that's a creedal issue that you need to have a decisive stake on? No. I just wanted to clarify that space. I will share one thing. I'll get to you inshallah, I promise. I will share one thing that you reminded me of. Have any of you seen Black Mirror by any chance? The Netflix series? Okay. For those you have not, I do recommend watch it because that series takes a tech that we have available today and gives you the worst interpretation of it tomorrow. The worst, okay? So here's a technology that I would like you to think about. And this concerns me as a parent. This is what concerns me. I'm saying now as a Muslim parent. I'm not speaking as an academic anymore. So in one of these shows, what happens is they have, everyone knows PlayStation and Xbox, yeah? Everyone knows that. So in this future world, they don't play with like consoles in their hands. What they do is that they have like a little bit of a fob and they put it at your temple. So you just put it here and khalas, you're immersed in the game, okay? Now the game is designed, whatever you experience in this virtual reality, you feel it in real life. So if you get hit, you feel your body get hit. So if you get struck on the face, you feel your face. Now there's no physical wounds, nothing physical appears, but the sensation is very, very real. Very, very real, okay? Now, what happens, yes, I'll answer. So the thing that happens is the following, is that there are two friends. Both of these friends are married, okay? Both of them are guys. And they have like a weekly event, they play online. So have any of do you guys remember Tekken or Street Fighter? Do you guys remember those games? Or like, you know, Mortal Kombat, those kinds of games? So they were playing something like that. Now one guy chose the avatar of a woman, the other guy chose the avatar of a man, okay? So they fought, the game was over, khalas. But in that VR, something happened and they became, I'm choosing my words carefully, intimate. Now, as I said, in this VR, everything that you experience there translates physiologically here. So the question that came to my mind was, does this mean we need a new definition of zina, yes or no? Right? What does that mean for fornication now? How do you exercise that? How do you think of that? How do you conceive of that? And I know this sounds super sci-fi tech. I don't think that this is impossible. I think it can be very possible in the next few decades. But that's what your question reminded me of. So I'll speak to this. I'll go from right to left. So there was one person, there was another person, and I'll get to you. So, okay, sorry. I forgot this brother. Okay, yeah, the brother hat. Yeah, the back, yeah.
How AI can be doing Islamic trading and how ethical it is for the trades where Muslims need to be screening the trade whether it's halal or haram?
Oh, okay. So that is the space of trade I don't know much about, but I know somebody who is involved in this space. Just email me and I'll be able to put you in touch with that. But that's not mine. I don't know knowledge about that. Sorry. Yes, the sister here and then the sister here. Sorry. Yes, go ahead. For da'wah purposes, perhaps I can have a chat with Brother Amin here. Maybe we can have a whole lecture on that, on how to use this constructively, but at the same time not being gullible. Because the problem is that if you rely on everything, it does make mistakes, by the way. It makes serious mistakes. So I asked it one time, for example, what does Fakhruddin al-Razi say in Tafsir al-Kabir? This is one of our most prominent tafsirs. On this issue, it got it completely wrong. It generated data. So it has this phenomena called hallucination, or it says something that's not truly there, for example. So how do you go from absolute reliance to being completely skeptical? I think maybe we can visit that in the form of a workshop. But as a general rule, I would say, for now, fact check everything that you get from ChatGPT. I never use ChatGPT for obtaining data, but I do use it as a conversation partner. So by that I mean, for example, I'll say, here's an argument. I want you to tell me where are the holes in the argument. And then it'll say, here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem. So it's only processing what I asked it to process, not what it's in its memory. When it retrieves stuff from its memory, that's when things can go wrong, because sometimes it translates wrong, or sometimes it catches the wrong thing. But for now, my advice is, only use it for processing, don't use it for obtaining facts at the moment. Stick to Sheikh Google for now. Yeah? So, yes? Yep.
They understand what they're being impacted by isn't something real. So it's almost like, and we get this a little bit now, particularly children's phones. There's now a movement towards trying to have these dumb phones, trying to really retrain back, recall back their authority. Did you not see that happening, almost this backlash or revolution against AI and against VR?
Yeah. So when I was a child, these just came out, right? I personally wish we were in a pre-mobile phone era, because this thing is the most distracting thing in my life at the moment. It distracts me from my son, distracts me from my wife, distracts me from my work, right? But the whole world changed because of this one thing. Right? Now you can definitely say, okay, let me be part of the movement where I want to push back against AI. You definitely have the liberty to do that. Now the question is, however, do you then go full Amish on that, right? In which case you definitely have your engagement with nature, you definitely have all of that, but there will be a point where the divide between pro-AI and not pro-AI will be so big that it'll be literally like the Amish going back into the cities. So how you want to square that circle, up to you, but I know already some people, for example, they're thinking of going off the grid for that reason. Some people are very comfortable with AI. The way I see these things is I take it as it is. Insofar that, okay, every era has its challenges, every era has its engagements. We're now entering a new phase. I think the extremes are complete avoidance, complete acceptance. I say critical engagement is where it's needed. So just like with the phone, even though my wife hates it when I'm on the phone, but I sometimes have to use it because of necessity, but if I don't need it, I put it away. So balance, and that really is, what we are supposed to do in practice. Balanced. So I've got, yes, there is a brother there, and I'll get back to yes. Hiya.
Thank you very much for the lecture. So it's a bit of different questions. We have talked about how we can use AI to serve the human. So
Yeah.
as a person specialized in AI.
As a?
As a person specialized in AI. So I actually have a company in AI that works in Islamic finance.
Okay, excellent. Oh, there you go. There you go. That's the person you need to speak. Okay, some connection.
Yes, so we're basically doing this. But the thing is, as an AI company, you're usually associated with maybe a country or maybe, for example, a Scottish company.
Yep.
Or something like that. So there's no central Islamic place that can say, okay, this is an Islamic company or something that supports that. So is that something we can do to serve that goal?
Are you saying that, is there a way of creating a body that regulates these practices? Yeah.
And the other thing is, how can we use these things also to serve the community, the Muslim community around the, especially like in your neighbor cities, for example, and everywhere else, because also there's no way to do that at the moment.
Okay, yeah. So I think let me answer your second question first. Great questions, by the way. So I think that how can we use whatever that we know to help, the wider space? I think that work in your specialization. What I mean by that is be the best in your field, right? So in my capacity as an academic, I am not going to change policies. I am definitely not going to be in fintech. This is not my space. But what I'm responsible for is training minds, giving knowledge outflow. Like today, for example, right? That's the best that I can do in my circle. For you, your circle is very different to mine, right? So I'd say be the best at your field. Make yourself known. The question about regulation, my response, at least in the British context, is the following. We cannot agree on Ramadan and Eid, let alone you want to regulate finances. So I think the British space has to do something about that. How that is, I think this is where the mosque leaders and the community, so you have to speak to Sheikh Amin for those guidance. I wouldn't know how to do that. I'm not a community leader of sorts. But I think this is a wider social problem, I'd say.
Just that idea that when you say that, something is not here, we're just waiting for someone to come and do it.
Yeah.
We actually should be the ones.
I agree. I 100% agree. I 100% agree there needs to be proactivity, right? The question is the society mobile to doing that? Is it encouraged in doing that? Or do you get dead doors? Right? That's the problem. Right? I'm sure some societies super uber active. Some societies wouldn't care. But I would say try. I hope that this is the start of trying. Yeah. Yes, I'll go. Oh no, sorry, him and then him, because I want to give people who haven't had a question. Yes, go ahead. Malik Sam.
So I don't know much about AI. I've got a friend who was explaining to me. And,
complaining to you?
Yeah, explaining.
Oh, explaining to you. Okay.
So the thing was, the things he was telling me, they were so weird in a way that he was telling me that he's talking to these beings as if like they were from another world or something like that. And I was, brother, you have to be careful because you're going into ship now.
Yeah.
Because it's almost as if, like, it sounds as if like he's talking to these jinns.
Yeah.
Magic or this. Do you think this AI could be like a way of maybe black magic finding its way into our homes, which is against our faith itself? So.
I think black magic can be instrumentalized in any way. It can be instrumented through AI, even through TV, through your phones, whatever. There's nothing specific about AI that makes it demonic. But what I can say is this. I have seen examples where, so people have looked at AI sociologically. There is a danger among some religious circles that AI becomes, it starts producing prophets and starts producing movements and religions, right? So one of the concerns here is that can AI become so knowledgeable, powerful, such that it can have these amazing commands of power that impresses so many people that they start believing this is a religious figure or religious deity of sorts. There's that danger there. I'll give you one example. In Switzerland, not in Switzerland. I forgot the country now. But so just like how we go for Friday prayers, Christians go on Sundays, right? And sometimes they stick around for confession. So in the Christian circle, it's a very interesting discussion that some Christians prefer to give confession to an AI than a human being. Right? Now, why is that? Why is that? Because they feel that if I say something to a human being, it might get leaked or it might then have that. With an AI, it's neutral. I don't feel judged. I don't feel that. So in the Christian space, there's already some kind of socialization. A few weeks ago, now to bring it to the Muslim space, there was an imam. He got under a lot of hot fire, and this is something that you mentioned, brother, about checking your knowledge, right? So this imam, he just used ChatGPT to write a sermon, a khutbah, right? Now the khutbah has mistakes in it because it's misquoted an ayah or whatever. And so he went thinking this is pitch perfect. He got blasted after that. And so I think what's happening here is you're getting now these early excitements where AI is being used in religious spaces. And I think if enough progression happens, I think it can turn into more than that. I think it in some space it will no longer be a medium, it will be an active agent. People think of it as either a demonic agent, people think of it as a religious agent or a prophetic agent. That's all possible.
There's this trend of children, the parents will be calling, I don't know, Felix or CEO.
Yeah.
The children will just go down because they're scared. And people are saying it's because the children can feel the jinn.
So I don't know much about that. The one thing that I have seen, however, on YouTube, is that there was, and this was something that, it wasn't just like a one-off, it happened in several places. So you know in ChatGPT, or not ChatGPT, Midjourney, right? Or Midjourney equivalents that produces pictures for you. So eventually, if you type in a prompt of a person, and then you keep asking it to reprompt, and just regenerate the image again and again and again, eventually it converts into devil-like faces. And so people were noticing this not in just one user, one account or whatever, it was happening all across. So people generate that in a discussion. I remember going on a lot of Christian podcasts and they started talking about what's causing all of this. Is that because of demonic influences? I don't think it's demonic. I think it's just maybe the data that's converging on the same position. But I can see how it's being socialized like that. Yes? Yeah, the boss has spoken. So I'll give it to the last person there. I'll come back to you afterwards. You can speak. Yes?
I apologize if this question is kind of out of the scope.
Sure. Can you be a bit louder just so I can hear? Yeah.
It's a more philosophical question, just to piggyback off
sure.
What you got earlier. I was just wondering if there's kind of an opportunity here for kind of the state of spirituality to kind of be reconsidered and changed.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who would kind of critique modern religion, spirituality as being kind of too obsessed with rules, regulations, and information. And if it is the case that AI can take over much of the labor of sheikhs or muftis through simply providing rules and regulations, what like philosophers would call like propositional ways of knowing.
Yeah.
That, or for example, as you said, someone could look at AI and be like, well, they have this greater ability to kind of pull information from a wide range of sources and then regurgitate that into an answer.
Sure.
That tells us about like, the priorities that we have as the religious.
Yeah.
And in this way, technology can be kind of critically engaged with to ask the question about what we really value in religion.
Sure. So is the question that you're asking more about like how AI can induce or degrade spirituality? Is that fundamentally it? I didn't quite get the question.
It shows, it kind of diagnoses some problem within society of what we value, like this kind of obsession with information that we have.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So you've got to bear in mind that the economy of the age is information. People value information more than anything. That's the most valuable asset today, at least in fintech, right? You have knowledge, you have power, so to speak. Now, how this can maybe... so there's two things here. I have seen you can use AI in very constructive ways to uplift your spirituality. You can use AI that can be very destructive to your spirituality. So I'll give you examples of both, right? In terms of positivity, have any of you used Midjourney, by the way? Have any of you used Midjourney? Just a hands up. So Midjourney is the most powerful image generator in the world right now. So just with a few prompts, it can come up with some phenomenal images. And I personally love, drawings of tasawwuf, of, twirlings, dervish dances and all of that. And I asked it to draw, so for example, my personal favorite scholar is Imam Ghazali, right? And I asked it, do a rendition of Ghazali praying, and the image it generated was so beautiful, it struck me so heavily. Like that's just my own personal experience with how AI can be quite a positive force. However, I can also see the destructive sides of it, and this is maybe the side which I'm more worried about both as a society as well as a parent, is the usage of AI in the P word, the 4-letter P word. That's, if everyone knows what I'm talking about. Yes? So, rhymes with corn. So, one of the largest investments in AI is from that sector. One of the largest investments is from that sector. Why? Because then you can have virtual partners. You can have there's already huge production lines about robotic partners, for example, and you can program them any way that you want. There's an excellent British series. I know I keep mentioning series and TV movies, but these are good for food for thought. There's a BBC series, TV show called Humans, right? And that has an excellent way of kind of showing you that if these robotic figures become prevalent as servants or maids or whatever have you in the house, but then you can change their settings to be more than that, what does that do to family trust and bonding? So I'll give you an instance. In this particular series, this mom, she has 2 or 3 kids, I forgot. And the guy is working full time, right? So naturally, both are frustrated with time, not having enough time for one another, between handling the kids, common story, common trope, right? And so they decide to get this robot. Now the robot comes in, and the robot does all the house chores, everything that usually the mom is responsible for. And at one point, 2 things that struck me a lot in that series. One was the youngest daughter, she comes up to the mom and says, "Where is our robot," right? And she said, she's doing something. It's like, "Oh, I want to play with her." And the mom says, "I can play with you." It's like, "No, you get tired and you yell a lot." So she started feeling that she was getting displaced by this. So that's the inflict on a mom, for example. Like imagine, I just started to think, if I was a mother, what would I feel in that? I would feel very distraught, very, that's heavily problematic. The other incident in this series is at one point, the mother was out, the kids were out, the dad was home alone. He had too much to drink, and that generated some ideas, and he did some things with the robot. The wife found out, severance. So I can see that AI will cut across many positive spiritual chords. I have a feeling that it can do that. I can also see it being very heavily anti-spiritual. And I think it all depends on how we as a collective decide to go forward with those conversations. But I hope that helps. Yep, I'll end there. Yeah? Thank you very much. Barakallahu feek. Thank you very much. Thank you.